Part 1. The night the town forgot itself. Midnight cracked like glass, and every streetlight blinked as if the stars had swallowed their breath. In that shiver of silence, the town forgot its own name. Signs turned blank. Mailboxes wore smooth faces. Even the weather vane at the church spun without direction, as if ashamed to point anywhere. People woke with mouths full of nothing. Not even a whisper of where they lived could be found. Only one person remembered a sliver of it. She was called Lena of the List, because she wrote everything that mattered in a pocketbook stitched with red thread. Everyone teased her for it yesterday. Nobody laughed tonight. She stood under the sagging elm by the square, rain freckling her cheeks, and opened the book with trembling hands. On page 1, in ink the color of old wine, she had written the town's name 100 times, as if repetition could make it permanent. Now the letters smudged and swam like fish under ice. She pressed her thumb to the page, and the ink recoiled. A wind moved, carrying the smell of river clay and extinguished candles. In that wind, Lena heard a bell that wasn't the church bell. Deeper, older, like the echo of a bell that rang before clocks were invented. The sound crawled along the cobbles and through doorframes, lifting memories as easily as a thief lifts a latch. Behind her, windows opened. Sleepy faces surfaced, searching for something they couldn't name. Lena's brother, Ivo, stumbled from their door, hair wild, eyes filmed with fog. "Where are we?" he asked, voice small, as if borrowed from a child he used to be. Lena reached for him and felt the flinch of someone who doesn't recognize the hand that loves him. "The bellwether," she whispered, though she didn't know why she knew that word. It felt like a word from her grandmother's warnings, a word with splinters. The bell tolled again, and an entire paragraph of Lena's book faded. Birthdays, recipes, the route to the ferry. She snapped the book shut, heart punching her ribs. Part 2. The bell demands a wait. Another toll shivered the dark, and the night pulled tighter, like a knotted rope around a throat. Doors unlatched of their own accord. The town exhaled a breath of blankness. Lena scraped a stub of chalk along the cobbles and wrote the name she could still almost hold. The line gleamed briefly, then paled, then fell away as dust. She tied a loop of red thread around Ivo's wrist and another around her own, knot to knot, as if memory could be persuaded by a simple bridge of color. The thread kept its red, that at least refused the fading. Old Merrick, the archivist, wandered from the library with a metal box clutched to his chest. He had once cataloged parish registers, shipping logs, baptismal names, the small handwriting of a town that believed itself solid. Tonight his spectacles were fogged and his mouth worked on a word that would not come. He shook the box. Inside, pages as empty as snow. Only one scrap still bore ink, the sentence broken where the fade had gnawed it. "Bellwether chooses the lightest town." It read, and the rest was missing, as if eaten by a careful animal. "Wait," Merrick rasped, and the syllables steadied him. "We must weigh what we are." At the fish market, the big hanging scale creaked in the breeze. Lena set her pocketbook in the pan, then the church's brass key, then a river stone she had kept since childhood. Names whispered around the square, thready and unsure, as neighbors brought burdens that meant something. The bread oven's cracked brick, a tooth the dentist kept in a jar, the mayor's gavel with the notch from a wedding 50 years ago. Each object settled the scale, and for a moment the air thickened as if the town remembered the drag of its own history. The bell tolled again, and windows went blind. Someone's shadow shortened and failed. Merrick lifted the scrap close to his failing eyes and read what the paper would allow. "Forged at the drowned foundry," he murmured. Clapper called the throat. 3 tolls to strip, 4 to swallow. The words trembled but held. Lena opened her book and found, stitched into the binding, a map her grandmother once muttered about while darning socks. Down river, marsh road, dead elm, foundry. She could see the route even as the letters crawled toward vanishing. A leaf fell from the square's elm, shaped like a comma, as if the sentence of the town had not yet ended. Ivo's gaze rolled, unfocused. The red thread on his wrist began to pale, pink to rose to the color of old breath. He looked at Lena and failed to land on her face. She tightened the knot between them until it bit skin. The 4th toll would swallow. The 3rd was close. Part 3. The road to the foundry. The bell trembled the air again, a 3rd toll dragging shadows across the square like ink spilled on stone. Lena clutched her book to her chest. The words within were collapsing, dissolving like salt in rain. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the bell itself, and she knew, if they waited for the fourth, the town would not exist to remember it had once been. Ivo swayed, his eyes glassy, the red thread dimming. Marek touched his shoulder but found no anchor in him. The archivist's hands shook around the empty metal box, but his voice came steady, downriver, to the drowned foundry. If we do not cage the bell, it will claim us. The townsfolk gathered like moths around a dwindling flame. Fear clung to them, yet each one carried something. A cracked mug, a splinter from the old schoolhouse, a shoe with no pair. They moved as if instinct told them objects might weigh them into reality, tethering them against the tide of forgetting. Lena led, her thread dragging Ivo behind. The night road stretched wide and wrong, houses sagging into silhouettes without windows, signs without letters. The air thickened with a taste of rust and riverweed. At the bend, where the marsh began, the elm tree stood twisted, its branches black fingers clawing the stars. This, Lena knew, was the marker her grandmother had whispered about. The marsh swallowed their steps. Mud pulled like hungry mouths, and reeds hissed with voices that might once have been neighbors. A woman carrying the cracked mug stumbled, and the mug fell, shattering into the muck. Her face blurred, her name fled her lips, and in silence she was gone. They pressed on, every loss striking the group like a hammer. Ivo staggered harder, his lips forming sounds without shape. The thread was the only bridge keeping him. Lena whispered his name again and again, even when he did not know it belonged to him. At last, the outline of the drowned foundry rose from the marsh, a skeleton of iron and stone, ribs of rusted beams stabbing the night. From within came the bell's pulse, not sound but heartbeat, older than the town, older than memory. The doorless arch gaped. Lena lifted the red-threaded knot, pressing her palm to the cold iron, and the bell spoke, not aloud but inside her. Name yourself or be nameless forever. Part 4, The Bell's Bargain. The words rattled through Lena's bones like a storm caught in a bottle. Name yourself or be nameless forever. The bell's voice was not a sound but a weight, pressing her heart until her breath faltered. Behind her, the townsfolk shifted restlessly, some already forgetting why they had followed her here. She held up her pocketbook. The pages trembled, ink fading even as she looked, but on the last page a single word remained. Her own name, Lena, written in a child's uneven hand long ago. She pressed the book to her chest and whispered it aloud. Lena. The foundry's beams groaned, and the bell's pulse stuttered as if it acknowledged the offering. The bell demanded more. The air thickened, and faces turned hazy in the torchlight. Ivo stumbled forward, his thread barely glowing now. He looked at her blankly. Who am I? His voice cracked, fragile as a glass about to shatter. Lena tightened her grip on the thread, desperate. You are Ivo, my brother. She said it with all the weight her heart carried. The bell quivered, but Ivo's gaze only half cleared. He swayed, clutching his chest. Old Marek, shaking yet resolute, stepped forward with his metal box. We must pay the toll, he rasped. He opened the box, and though it looked empty, the bell seemed to lean toward it, as if smelling something within. Marek's hand trembled as he reached inside, and when he pulled it back, his eyes were duller, his mouth slower. I gave it my birthday, he whispered. I don't know when I was born anymore. The bell thrummed, satisfied, its iron ribs glowing faintly. The foundry seemed to breathe. One by one, the townsfolk began to step forward, offering what little fragments of themselves they could. A woman pressed her wedding ring to the base of the bell and gasped as she forgot her husband's face. A child laid down a wooden toy, and his laughter thinned into silence. Lena's knees shook. She understood now. The bell did not take lives all at once. It hollowed people piece by piece until they were shells. This was its bargain, a sacrifice of memory for the chance to survive. But something inside her rebelled. If the town kept feeding the bell, it would never stop. It would strip them until there was nothing left but empty vessels walking in circles. She clutched the thread binding her to Ivo. No more pieces. We need the whole. The bell seemed to hear her thought. Its voice rolled through her skull. Then come inside and ring me yourself. Part 5, The Throat of the Bell. The foundry's arch yawned wide, swallowing torchlight into its throat of rust. The bell waited inside, enormous, black as drowned stone, its surface carved with symbols Lena half recognized from her grandmother's bedtime mutterings. It was suspended from beams that looked too fragile to bear its weight, yet they had endured centuries of silence, waiting for this night. Lena felt the air hum against her skin as though the iron itself was breathing. The bell's voice surged inside her skull again. If you would save them, you must strike me. But strike true, and what you give will never return. Her grip on Ivo's wrist tightened. The thread still connected them, but it flickered like a candle drowning in wind. If she left him outside, he would dissolve into nothing before she returned. If she brought him in, the bell might drink him whole. Marek's voice echoed faintly behind her. The clapper is called the throat. It drinks memory until there's none left. That's the curse of it. His eyes looked pale, like a man standing at the edge of forgetting himself. Lena stepped into the foundry, her boots sinking into a carpet of ash and drowned moss. The townsfolk lingered outside, unwilling to enter, shadows already blurring at the edges of torchlight. She pulled Ivo forward, even as his legs buckled. The bell loomed. Beneath it lay a pit of water blacker than night, a reminder of the floods that had once drowned this place. Chains, slick with rust, anchored the bell's base to stone. The clapper inside shifted slightly, though no wind stirred it, like a tongue testing its teeth. The voice returned. Strike me, Lena of the list. Pay the toll. Give me the one thing you cannot bear to lose. Her mind raced. She thought of her book. The ink was already fading. She thought of the town. Their names were slipping. She thought of Ivo, eyes clouded, his mouth forming her name without knowing it. The choice was impossible. If she gave her memories of Ivo, he might live, but she would not know him. If she gave the town, she would save her brother but bury her people in oblivion. And if she gave herself, what would remain? Ivo's weak voice trembled beside her. Sister, don't forget me. Lena's heart thundered like the bell itself. She lifted her hand to the iron, the red thread burning against her skin, and the symbols flared as though waiting for her answer. The bell's voice deepened. Final. The fourth toll is near. Choose. Part 6, the fourth toll. The fourth toll came not as sound but as collapse. It bent the air, made the walls bow inward, and pressed Lena to her knees. The bell's hum rumbled through her bones until her ribs felt hollow, as though the marrow itself might leak from her. Outside, the townsfolk cried out once, then silence rolled in. Their forms blurred like smoke drawn by a draft. Lena could feel them thinning, names peeling away like bark from a dying tree. The town itself shuddered in the distance, roofs sagging, streets unraveling into dust. The bell was swallowing. Ivo fell to the ground, the thread between them burning bright red for a final heartbeat before paling again. His mouth opened, and a strangled sound slipped out, half a word, half a plea. Lena gripped his hand tight, though she could feel the emptiness growing behind his eyes. The bell's voice filled the foundry, deeper now, heavy with hunger. The toll is paid. The town is mine. Unless you strike me, Lena, unless you give what I require. Her book dangled from her other hand. The last page still held her name, barely. All other words had run like rivers into blankness. If she offered the book, she knew she would lose not only her own history but the map, the memory, the fragile fragments that tethered the town to its past. She looked up at the iron giant. The clapper inside swayed as though it were breathing, a lung of bronze. Its surface glistened wet, as though from blood. Marek's words echoed in her head. 3 tolls to strip, 4 to swallow. And this was the 4th. There would be no 5th. Lena pressed her forehead to Ivo's and whispered, "Hold on." His eyes flickered once, a boy's eyes she remembered from years ago when he carried frogs in his pockets and made her laugh until her sides ached. She realized then that the bell was not only devouring names and dates. It was feasting on laughter, the texture of moments, the taste of belonging. Her rage rose, hot and trembling. If sacrifice was the law of the bell, then perhaps she could twist it. Perhaps she could choose not to feed it a memory, but something else. The symbols on the bell's skin pulsed, waiting. And Lena, clutching her brother with one hand and her book with the other, whispered into the iron silence, "Then take me." The foundry froze. Even the marsh outside held its breath. Part 7. The Offering. The foundry walls groaned as if her words had cracked the air itself. Rust flaked down like red snow, and the chains that held the bell shivered, links rattling against stone. "Take me," she had said, and the bell heard. The clapper inside swung once, slow, deliberate. A soundless vibration spread through the ground, crawling into her bones. Ivo jerked, gasped, and for the first time in hours his eyes cleared, focusing on her. "Lena." His voice was fragile, but it was him. The thread between them flared bright crimson. But Lena felt her pocketbook turn to ash in her palm. Page by page, word by word, her written world dissolved into nothing. The names she had copied, the recipes she had preserved, the tiny sketches she had drawn, all gone. Her memories began slipping too, tugged loose like threads from a tapestry. The first to fade was her grandmother's face. She clutched at it in panic, but the contours unraveled, leaving only a sense of warmth she couldn't anchor to a name. The bell drank eagerly. Yes, it thundered within her. Your name, your time, your weight. Give it. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself to stay upright. She would not let the bell think it had conquered her. If her sacrifice bought back the town, it would be given as a gift, not stolen as prey. And then something shifted. The red thread glowed not just between her and Ivo, but outward, splitting, weaving, spreading toward the foundry door. One by one, the blurred shapes of townsfolk began to sharpen. A woman gasped and clutched her chest, recognizing her own breath again. Merrick stumbled, blinking, whispering the word library, as if it had just been returned to him. The bell roared in anger, its bronze body vibrating with such force that the beams above cracked. Water surged from the drowned pit, climbing in waves as though to swallow everything. Lena stood beneath the looming weight of the bell, her hands bleeding where she held the red thread. Her memories continued to fade, tearing away piece by piece, but Ivo's grip on her arm was strong. "Don't," he pleaded. "Don't give everything." The bell screamed again, furious now. The symbols across its surface burned, demanding more. All or nothing. Choose. And Lena, dizzy with the hollowing of her own mind, realized she had one final chance to turn the bell's hunger against itself. Part 8. The Trick. The bell strained against its chains, so immense it seemed the whole foundry might rip apart if it broke free. Its voice shook through the air. All or nothing. Give or I devour. Lena swayed, her book gone, her mind thinning like smoke. But through the fog she clung to one thought, one lesson. Names only mattered if they were written, spoken, shared. And she had given hers aloud, not into silence, but into the thread. The red string on her wrist pulsed, glowing brighter with each heartbeat. She looked down and saw Ivo gripping it fiercely, his face streaked with tears but his eyes burning clear. Around them, other townsfolk now touched the thread where it had split and woven outward. Every hand, every grip, stitched new knots into the light. It was not just hers anymore, it was theirs. Lena staggered forward until her palm pressed flat against the bell's cold flank. "You don't own weight," she whispered. "We do. Together." The bell's cymbals flared violently, rejecting her words. The clapper swung, about to toll again, but Lena looped the red thread over the jagged carvings, binding them in a crude knot. The iron hissed where the thread touched, as if it burned. Then she spoke. Not her name this time, but all the names she still remembered, pouring them into the bell like molten lead. Ivo, Merrick, Eliza with the cracked mug, the baker with flour on his shoes, the boy who carved birds into the fence. Each word rang like a strike. Each name weighed the bell down. The foundry shook. Water rose to their knees, black and biting. But the townsfolk shouted their names too, voices raw and desperate. The thread flared brighter with every cry. The bell screamed, a roar of iron against iron, as if drowning under the very thing it had sought to devour. His body convulsed, cymbals cracking. The clapper tried to swing, but the thread cinched tighter, wrapping like fire around its throat. Lena's mind wavered, her memories still leaking away. Her knees gave out. Ivo caught her before she sank fully into the water. "Stay," he begged. His voice was the last clear thing in her head. The bell's body split with a thunderous crack. Light, white and red, braided like the thread itself, erupted outward, racing through the foundry and into the marsh, into the town, into the sky. For a heartbeat, Lena felt the weight of every name, every laugh, every story restored. Then the light faded, leaving only silence. The bell hung broken, chains slack, clapper dead, and Lena could no longer remember if she had ever existed. Part 9, The Hollow and the Harvest. Silence spread, so deep it seemed the marsh itself had forgotten how to breathe. The broken bell dangled, split wide, its once hungry clapper stilled forever. Water drained back into the pit, leaving only a damp floor and the reek of rust. The townsfolk stood blinking in the half-light, their faces sharp again, their voices testing names on their tongues like newborns rediscovering speech. "Eliza," whispered the woman with the cracked mug, though she had no mug anymore. "Merrick," said the archivist, clutching his empty box as if it were treasure. One by one, they called their names, and each sound stitched them back to themselves. They looked around, dazed, grateful, alive. But where Lena had stood, there was only the thread. The red cord lay coiled on the floor, soaked dark but glowing faintly, as if it remembered what she had been. Ivo knelt, hands trembling, gathering it to his chest. "Sister," he whispered, searching the air, the crowd, the shadows. But no answer came. Merrick put a hand on his shoulder. His voice shook, aged and thin. "She gave herself. The bell demanded all. She gave everything so we could remain." The townsfolk bowed their heads. Some wept. Others touched the cord as if it might still carry warmth. But Ivo would not let go. "No," he said fiercely, pressing the thread to his wrist, tying it again, knot to knot. "She isn't gone. Not if we hold her." And strangely, the cord brightened. Not much, just a pulse like a faint heartbeat. The townsfolk gasped. Marek's pale eyes widened. "Perhaps," he faltered, then steadied himself. "Perhaps she is not lost, but hollowed. An empty vessel waiting to be filled again." The thought took root like fire in dry wood. Eliza stepped forward, laid her hand on the thread, and spoke softly. "Lena." The cord shivered. Another man followed, then another. Dozens of voices, calling her name, feeding it back into the thread she had given them. Ivo clutched it tighter, tears spilling freely. "Come back," he begged. "Come back to us." And for the first time since the bell broke, a wind stirred in the foundry, carrying with it the sound of a breath that did not belong to any of them. Part 10, The Return of a Name. The wind rippled through the drowned foundry, curling around beams and broken stone, whispering like 1,000 turning pages. The townsfolk froze, their voices hushed mid-breath. Only the thread moved, glowing now as though lit from within, a pulse steadying into rhythm. Ivo pressed it to his chest. "Lena," he whispered again, his voice raw, torn between hope and grief. The thread answered with a flicker of warmth. The air thickened. From the shattered bell's husk, light seeped like sap from a wounded tree, slow at first, then flowing faster, weaving itself into a shape. Not a body, not yet, but a presence, a contour of something remembered. Eliza gasped. "She hears us." Merrick, trembling, lifted his cracked spectacles. "No, she is us. Every name we speak gives her weight." And so the townsfolk called her. Together, voices rising, they poured her name into the thread. "Lena, Lena, Lena." Each sound stitched the outline tighter. Ivo's grip on the cord burned, and with a cry he tied it around his own wrist again, not into flesh. "Take from me if you must, but come back." The light surged, the outline solidified, and then, staggering from the glow, came a girl with eyes dazed and skin pale, but alive. Her lips parted as if relearning how to shape words. "Ivo?" she whispered, the name falling from her like the first drop of rain before a storm. The boy caught her in his arms, sobbing, laughing, holding on as though the thread would never again be cut. Around them, the townsfolk wept and cheered. Names rang out across the marsh like bells themselves, not tolling doom, but singing memory. The broken foundry groaned as if relieved, its chains finally stilled. The air smelled of rain, not rust. Lena leaned on her brother, exhausted but whole. She would never recover every memory. Too much had been fed to the bell, but she was alive and she belonged. Her name lived because others carried it, and the town, scarred but standing, understood a truth deeper than stone. No single memory could withstand forgetting, but together they weighed more than any curse. The red thread coiled on Lena's wrist and Ivo's, no longer pale, no longer fragile. It glowed steady, a reminder, promise. The town had a name again, and it would never be lost.